First, unbelievable. Here we go, core of the way of the year. We'll convene the meeting, and at this point in time, public comments. Are there any members of the public wish to address the committee? Seeing none, I'll move for approval of minutes.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first, I have a second. Any discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Moving item D, election of APC chair and vice chair for 2018.
Mr. Chair, I would move to nominate Mr. Dave Trotter from Moraga for chair and Julie Pierce for vice chair.
Okay.
I'll second that.
You're going to accept second your own nomination?
Would you like to second instead?
Yes.
Chair typically doesn't second position.
That's okay. We'll join
I was seeing a problem. I was seeing a problem here, Bob.
Okay.
I was trying to solve it.
On second thought, I don't want to relinquish the chair. Anyway, we have the first, and the second is myself, and we'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Just thought I'd ask. Welcome. You take it.
And the gavel.
Oh, that's right. I've never used this. I've never used this in my life.
And I have to say now I'm going to take the floor for the next half hour to make a speech about the goals of the CCTA and this committee in particular. But I want to say a couple things. One is that Bob, I think you did a great year, had a great year as chair running these meetings, and I've been following you now for the last decade or so. At the mayor's conference and whatnot, coming after you, trying to live up to the standards that you've set. And I just want you and everybody else to know that this truly is the happiest day of my life. Okay.
Oh dear.
So, with that in mind, I'm a very serious person, believe it or not, and I like to get a lot of serious things done, but I like to keep it light as well, and these guys know that. And like I said, I'm stealing a line from a friend of mine at my old law firm who was forced to get up at Pillsbury, Matson, and Sutro by one of the senior partners to accept a trophy for finishing in third place in the San Francisco Lawyers Basketball League. And he didn't want to do it. He thought it was a complete, and did do it in public at one of our firm functions. And he didn't want to do it. And so that's the line he laid on and did this very deadpan, I would rather be doing anything else because this is the happiest day of my life. So I've always admired that guy's sense of humor, and I've used it from time to time. All right, next up we have our consent calendar. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion carries unanimously. We're joined by our Commissioner Tom Butt. Hope the rain wasn't too bad and the traffic coming over.
Oh, fun.
All right. Next up, we have our regular agenda items, and the first one is legislative update. Do we have?
Good morning, Commissioners. Congratulations, new Chair Trotter. We're very excited to be here celebrating the happiest day of your life with you. So we'll try to keep legislation serious and fun this morning. So very quickly, you have quite a few pages in your packet on the federal legislation. President Trump has put forward his infrastructure plan, and there is it's very wide-ranging. It covers quite a bit of topics, but what it doesn't clearly outline yet is how all of this is going to be funded. So at this point, the ball is really in Congress's court to look at this plan and decide what action they're going to take. There hasn't necessarily been any significant movement at this point in terms of Congress taking up an infrastructure bill, so we'll be watching that. I know not just our federal advocates, but the entire transportation industry is watching and waiting very closely to see what's going to come out of this and which pieces of the proposed plan Congress is going to take up and move forward. One of the things that is interesting in here to us that you might see, starting on page 6.4, there's quite a bit of information about potential policy reforms and streamlining project delivery. So that's something, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we'll be keeping our eye on because many of these could help speed up how we deliver projects directly to the public. But I want to point out also on 6.8 at the very bottom of the page, there's some discussion about reforming the career technical education program with more emphasis on STEM. And so that's also something we're going to be watching really closely. I know that that's an item the board has expressed some interest in supporting STEM education, and it's something that staff is currently kind of working on a plan to figure out how we do that in Contra Costa in partnership with some of the folks already focused on that. So I just wanted to kind of flag that for you as well. And I know that our state advocate, Mark Watts, is here, and he has quite a bit to talk about. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the federal portion before we move on.
Does anybody have any questions of Lindsay? Seeing none, let's proceed. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, Chairman, and congratulations. And I've enjoyed coming here and appearing before you, Mr. Taylor. The point in time that the legislative process is in is a week or so ago was the final date for the introduction of bills. There were more than 1,000 introduced on the last day, a significant number of which were spot bills. Yes. And so we're still waiting for the spot bills to turn into what they're going to be, so we're still reviewing a lot of these bills. I have no bills to present to you today for consideration, but I thought I'd just give you an update on a couple of other items. First, the Department of Motor Vehicles finally was approved to release their regulations that deal with autonomous vehicles. This past Monday, the Office of Administrative Law completed their review. And just as a reminder, these regulations pertain to manufacturers and others who wish to test vehicles that have no steering wheels or other usual driving appurtenances, and applies mainly to non-commercial, non-multi-passenger vehicles, just regular sedans and the like, as differentiated from the shared autonomous vehicle program that is underway here in the county. In addition, I wanted to point out that the allocations are from Senate Bill 1 are flowing out the door. Most of the formula-based allocations have been processed, and several of the remaining allocations and which are competitive in nature are under review, and we expect by the May meeting that those project awards will be announced. Amongst the projects that were allocated most recently were the state rail assistance. This was a small amount that was dedicated to intercity rail and commuter rail programs throughout the state. There's 8 different agencies, and the capital corridors did receive their fair share of the allocation. I would note, and I didn't mention this in my report, but the San Joaquins did not receive an allocation yet, as they're reserving their opportunity to match it with another competitive grant program. So if they win that or are not awarded that other grant program, they will proceed and return to the administration for a request for their funding at that point in time. In addition, there have been several leadership changes in the transportation arena. The Cal STA, State Transportation Agency Secretary Brian Kelly, moved on to become the CEO of the High-Speed Rail Authority. There had been an engaged search underway for quite a while, and lo and behold, they found the CEO sitting a couple of streets over and in the secretary. So he's taken on that burden. His first major responsibility is to release the biennial business plan. That'll be coming out in March this month. And we expect to find some unsettling news in terms of cost growth and project delivery timeframe. But if anybody can pull that organization into shape, Brian Kelly's got the chops to do it. To replace him as the secretary, Brian Annis, who had been undersecretary, who had a long history working on transportation matters in the Capitol and for the Department of Finance previous to that, is now the new secretary. And he's been officially designated, was acting for a short period, but now he's officially the secretary for the remainder of this administration. And last but not least, the Caltrans director, Malcolm Dougherty, who'd been there for 8 or 9 years, has decided to move on to the private sector, and replacing him is the Caltrans district director out of San Diego, Lori Berman. And she's got over 30 years working in Caltrans, the last decade, pretty much a decade, working as the district director and having a very good program delivery record to show in San Diego. So we have high hopes for that director to come in and keep the pedal to the metal on getting projects delivered on time. Beyond that, there have been 2 hearings of note. I have pointed out the first one had been on autonomous vehicles, and that was done on February 20th. But coming up tomorrow in Anaheim, Senator Bell, the chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee, is conducting a hearing on how are things progressing on the implementation of SB1. And I think there will be a lot of excellent news. The private sector has put together, with the ARTBA, a pro transportation group in Washington, put together a very in-depth economic analysis of what to expect from SB1. That will be shared at tomorrow's hearing, so we'll see some of the results of that getting reported in the press. So that's my report for today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Mark? Yes.
I know you're not can't quite see the future, but I was wondering as this term comes dwindling down, do you see as some of these people start doing an exit, do you see a dark cloud of like some really key positions that could hurt us or help us? I know it's a deep question, but you know,
there is an ominous feeling in the Capitol, and has been there because of the issues with harassment, sexual and otherwise, in the workplace. If that's what you're alluding to.
Any kind of information you can give us?
It's
because you hear things, but you're the man.
No, it's a lingering, ongoing issue. The two rules committees have been working to improve and modernize the legislature's response in a human relations kind of aspect, instead of a political aspect, so that the people that are making the allegations get treated much more fairly. But nevertheless, rumors abound about more allegations coming forward. So we're constantly in the Capitol wondering, is there going to be another shoe to drop? The outcome of what's happened so far is we've got several vacancies and special elections coming up that'll have to be walked through. Without getting political, I don't sense anything that's going to be, well, I can't say that. I was going to say I can't sense anything troublesome for this region, but until something happens, you just can't really say. But so far, the actual effects have been felt mostly in the LA delegation, Southern California, in terms of what's going on. I don't know how to answer it better than that.
Any other questions? Yes, Neil.
Yep, Mark, thanks. It's always great to hear the inside story. But on a slightly different angle than what Bob was just talking about, obviously since Caltrans, the head of Caltrans is a political appointee, new administration comes in, and there's always that exodus the last 8 to 10 months, and actually that's how we got Randy. But do you see Lori as maybe being somebody who might have legs to stay longer in the next round? Or is that...
Yeah, my impression is, A, she would want to, which is always question number one, and B, that she's got the chops to be, whoever the next governor is, to be on their list to retain, and no reason to move beyond her. I don't see anything in her background that would give anybody any cause. you never know if a governor comes in and has made a commitment to somebody, but in this case, there's just no reason to see that from this perspective.
Yeah, I think it's a good fit. I think it's a good opportunity for us too. So, great, thanks.
And so just to follow up on that, Mark, does this new director of Caltrans have the chops to, for example, help people that are in the position that my town is in, where we have Caltrans basically holding the purse strings on control over emergency reimbursement funding for various disasters, including a sinkhole and a bridge that got demolished. And some of that's state money, but a lot of it is federal highway, FEWA, or whatever, however you pronounce that.
Right.
Does she have a background experience? Is she the kind of person that will be open to pleas from local cities like Moraga saying, why are you not giving us back the money we're due?
That's the advantage of her coming out of a district director's operation in a very active and forward-looking district in San Diego. So yes, I would think that one of the hallmarks of the previous district director, Gary Gallegos, who ended up heading up Sandag, and then followed by Lori, is that they were very collaborative and engaged working with their local partners. So I would think that she would be somebody who you would be able to reach out to and say, we've got a local assistance problem, and it's not getting fixed by the district, and it's not being addressed by headquarters. And I think she would.
Do you know her personally?
I've not worked with her a lot, but we could help her. In fact, she's coming to address a meeting that I'm coordinating on Tuesday, so I could start the conversation there and work with Mr. Hale to see that we can get her down here.
This is good. This is good to know. We sort of save that thought.
Okay.
Lobbying is a part of our overall strategy at the town to try to get the several $1 million back to replenish our general fund.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions from Mark before we move on?
Just a few comments, Chair. So we're already thinking about having a meeting with Lori and kind of briefing her on our overall program to get her up to speed on what's going on with SB1 and some of the funding commitments associated with that.
Right.
And then the other thing is...
Would you like us to brief you on our specific requirements?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Where we've finished the repairs, we're entitled to reimbursements up to like 97%. And it's our number one goal for the city of Moraga, town of Moraga for this year, reimbursement. I can get you some information if you like.
That would be great.
Okay, thank you.
And then the second component of that is the chief deputy also was appointed as well in the past week. It's Ryan Chamberlain, and he was the director of District 12 in Orange County. And so both seats have been filled in the headquarters office, and so we have good relationships with both of those individuals.
Could you send me an email after this meeting, and then I can use that to be the link for responding? Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this item? Not seeing any other, so thank you very much, Lindsay and Mark.
Thank you.
We'll move on. All right. Next up under regular agenda items is item 7.0. This is Senate Bill SB1 Local Partnership Program, approval to revise project nomination. Staff seeks approval of a resolution which will authorize staff to program $4.8 million in formulaic LPP funds to the I-680 SR4 Phase 3 project. Is there a staff report?
Yes, and I'm pleased to present this item, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Back in December, you approved nominating Innovate 680 for the $4.8 million we expect to get from SB1 Formula-Based Local Partnership Program. Today, we're seeking your approval to revise our nomination to program the $4.8 million to I-680 State Route 4. Over the past year, we tirelessly tried to get Caltrans to commit funding to the 684 project. As you know, the project is expected to be shovel-ready by the end of this month and has a shortfall, partly because we need to replace the Grayson Creek Bridge. I'm pleased to say this effort came to fruition in January after Tim and Randy got a solid commitment from Caltrans ex-director Malcolm on a funding plan to cover the shortfall on the project. The proposed funding plan calls for the authority to program the $4.8 million, our share of the formulaic LPP funds to the project. In return, Caltrans will program $20.5 million in SHOP funds, which is their maintenance funds, and support our application for $33.6 million in competitive local partnership program from SB1. We submitted our application for the competitive LPP funds back in January 30th. I'm pleased to say we received letters of support from our California legislature, Grayson, Frazier, Dodd, Clayger, and Thurmond, as well as MTC and Caltrans. So we are very hopeful that we will be successful. Caltrans also has made good on their commitment to program the $20.5 million in SHOP funds as they're currently going through the process, and we expect the CTC to approve the 2018 SHOP at the March 22nd meeting. We recommend approval. With this information, we recommend approval of Resolution 18.08B, which will authorize staff to program the $4.8 million in our formula-based LPP funds to the 684 Phase 3 projects. We don't anticipate your action will impact progress on Innovate 680 since we do have sufficient Measure J funds to keep the project development going on the project. Also, another piece of good news, MTC is making good on their promise to program $8 million in CMAQ funds to use on project development activities on the I-680 northbound express lane. In addition, you can always program our future LPP funds to Innovate 680 from future cycles. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, any questions on this item? Yeah, let's move. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll call it back and call for the question. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Appreciate it. The next item is item 8.0. This is requesting authorization to negotiate a one-year extension to our agreement number 435 with Stantec Consulting Services for program and project management services. Staff report. Tim.
Thank you, Chair Trotter, and again, congratulations on your nomination. I'm looking forward to working with you and all of you on, there's a lot of exciting things that go on this year on projects. The authority relies on program and project management consultant to assist in delivery of the capital improvement program implementation of projects identified in our expenditure plan. The consultant essentially acts as an extension of staff to the authority staff. And Stantec has been providing these services to the authority under agreement number 435 since April 15, 2015. The agreement was an initial 2-year performance period with the option to extend by 2 one-year extensions at the discretion of the authority. In June 2017, the authority approved the first 1-year extension in the amount of $4,416,732 for a total new agreement value of $13,306,732. And this amendment also extended the agreement to the end of this June of 2018. The Stantec teams are providing the authority the needed support for expansion of Contra Costa 501 programs, the development of the SAV pilot program, and to make Gomenson Station a hub for innovation. Both the SAV pilot project and the Contra Costa 501 strategic plans will be completed this year in 2018, and these tasks require the expertise and key personnel of the Stantec team to complete by the end of the year to not affect our programs. In addition, the Stantec team has developed excellent historical knowledge of our projects at the authority. Currently, we have 2 projects under construction, the SR4 Balfour and I-80 Central Phase 1. Both of those projects will be anticipated to be completed this year. And then we're also ramping up and obtaining approvals and getting 2 projects ready to list on 680 express lanes and the 684 Phase 3 interchange for construction this year as well. The Stantec team has been restructured while retaining key personnel, and the new arrangement will minimize disruption to all of our programs, the Contra Costa 501 program, the SAV pilot program, and also delivery of milestones on our projects. While reducing the new arrangement will actually reduce the overall cost of the contract with a lower overhead rate from one of the new key sub-consultants. So for the above reasons, staff seeks authorization to negotiate a 1-year extension to agreement number 435 with Stantec for continued program and project management services. Staff will seek further authority board approval no later than June 2018 once a negotiated scope and budget are complete.
Thank you, Tim. Any questions of staff on this item? It was not clear to me, Tim, from looking at the report, how much you think this amendment is going to consist of at the end of the day. I mean, the financial implications section indicates that this agreement is funded, and then it gives a range of about up to $11 million. Do you have any idea about what we're actually talking about here?
So we haven't started negotiations with Stantec yet, but it'll probably be somewhere in the ballpark as the last amendment, roughly $4 to $5 million.
For the 1 year.
For the 1 year.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment on this item? Not seeing any, we'll bring it back for a vote. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Tim. And we'll move on to the next item, which is item 9, approval of the fiscal year 2017-18 mid-year budget for CCTA and the Congestion Management Agency. Brian.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Brian Kelleher. I'm the Finance Manager, and I'm going to walk you through the changes to the fiscal year 17-18 budget. On an annual basis, we adopt the budget every June. We start the process in April, and typically, because a lot of our projects are, the bulk of our funds are all projects related, we get to you in February because it takes a while for us to get the majority of the invoices in, and it gives staff to get a better feel for where we are with the projects and go through it. So as we show here, there's a summary of our budget. As we go through the sources, we have the revenues on top, we have the sales tax revenues, and then we have our grant funding from federal, state, and local revenues, and then we have investment income and other income. The other income is just miscellaneous income in there. And then we have the bond proceeds and other sources. As we go through the projects, we have the project section, which is the bulk of it, which is about $90 million. We have the program sections, which is allocated funds based on commitments from the strategic plan. We have the planning section, which includes the CMA functions and the plan development areas, allocations that they're working on with the cities, and then we have administrative and debt service. As you can see, there's a small change this year. We're reducing it about $3.2 million. And as you look at the change up there, some of the bigger numbers that stick out is local revenues. That's down $10.5 million. I can speak louder. That wasn't in the budget. Giants fans, we think alike.
Last time it was the cord.
Kick it around.
Perfect. Thank you. As we look at the changes on the far right-hand column, some of the big numbers that stick out to you is local revenues decreasing about $10.5 million, bond proceeds increasing about $4 million. As we go through the slides here, we'll get more into the CIP projects. You can see down in the expenditure in the uses section, projects is down about $6.2 million. The big change in the local revenue is there an amendment to the ECRFA on the Balfour project, and the ECRFA fees went from a $9 million budget this year to a $1 million budget. So there's an $8 million reduction in there because the amendment with ECRFA was to have the authority use Measure J funds first before they sent us the allocation for the ECRFA funds. So with all of our grants, if there's a reduction, it's a change in the project. So these funds will come into us next year as the construction continues into next fiscal year 18-19. The bond proceeds have increased about $4 million. That's to make up the difference in some of the funding from the grant funds to help fund the Balfour project and some of the other funding projects as well. Also in the local revenues, the decrease is we've had some changes on the I-680 carpool lane. That construction's not due to start, I think, until July. So those have been postponed out till the next fiscal year as well. And again, those numbers and the postponement of some of the expenditures on Balfour and the I-680 are part of the reduction of the $6.2 million. So from the beginning of the year till the mid-year budget, we see a decrease of about $3.2 million. We get to sales tax revenue. That's the main part of our component. You can see that it's continuing to increase, and we've got some small increments in there. We had the 5% a couple years ago. We saw 2% last year, and our budget is probably roughly about 2%. As we get into the next slides, it's, for the first quarter through and some of our second quarter information that we've seen, it looks like it's going to be about 5%. But based on the economy, that things are changing month to month. What we like to do, what I personally like to do, is not overcommit the funds, because a lot of the cities and the programs count on this money and call us on a regular basis. What are your sales tax projections? And if we say we're going to get 5% and they end up having a shortfall, they're going to point the finger at us. So I try and stay conservative as possible. This is the first quarter information. The State Board of Equalization send us on a monthly basis some activity. It takes about 3 months after the end of the quarter for us to get the detailed information. So this is just the first quarter. When I go to the authority board in a few weeks, I should have this week the numbers so I can give you 6 months of activity. But as you can see in here, gas tax, which is our number one item at the top, we have that at the top, is we've actually seen an increase. The sales tax we're receiving, the gas tax prices are increasing, so this is the first time we've seen an increase on the gas tax in quite a while. As you go out to the far right-hand column, that's a percentage of revenue that we receive from the authority. So gas, it brings us about 8%. Construction and heavy equipment taxes that we receive on that is about 14%. Retail, new auto, and restaurant is all about the economy, and those seem to be doing pretty well. We have our non-retail Amazon. Amazon is one of the biggest sales tax provider from internet sales, so we kind of have them highlighted in there, and that's up about 2%. When we see the new sales tax information for this holiday season, I would expect it to jump quite a bit as everybody starts to transition to online sales. So we're up about 5.61 for the first quarter of this fiscal year compared to last year. Some of the revenue projections and things that I've seen for 6 months, we're up about 6.5% on our allocations, but we won't know for sure until we get our information next week. Our capital projects, as we talked about a little bit before, there is the outside funding to help us fund these CIP projects. The RM2 has gone up about $400,000. The BATA funds that we receive is decreased, which has to do with the 680 and also has to do with some of our work on, I believe it's the I-80 project as well. The ECRFA piece is the big number of $8 million that we just talked about. And then some other grant funding that we receive. We receive some grant funding that's in the planning, congestion management, and in the PDA section. We have the federal surface transportation that helps fund some of the projects. That's about $1.4 million. We have our state planning, programming, and monitoring. That's about $630,000 budgeted for this year. And then we also have our local match that based on some of the activities that we provide as the CMA, we outsource and we bill the individual cities for, and that's going to be about $375,000. That's based off of our budget. It usually comes in a lot lower, a little bit lower than that. And then we also have our annual program from the TFCA, which is about $1.5 million. And then we have some state transportation agency grants, the GMS, which is $1.4 million. As last month, as Mr. Hale brought to you the Momentum Agreement, we're going to get from the state $3.5 million. This budget in here of funds of $1.4 million matches the expenditures that we're going to use to fund some of the projects out there. This Momentum is set up as a completely separate fund from the authority, and it tracks separately so that there's no mixture of funds between CCTA and the Momentum funds that we're going to be receiving in there. The Measure J capital projects, which is our main capital projects, is the categories 1 through 9. The cost for those projects is going to be roughly about $55.5 million. When you allocate the funding per project area, it's about $11.6 million. It leaves you with a balance of about $43.8 $9 million. And where the funding comes for that is the Measure J fund. Measure J went out and we did a bond issuance in June for $100 million. And of that $100 million, we're projected to use about $43.9 million. That leaves us about $56.1 million for next year and the years after as these capital projects progress. And then for the Measure J, we also have the breakdown per the strategic plan. For every dollar we receive, a certain percentage goes to each program. It's $86.5 million in sales tax. We also have some revenues and bond funding, which make up about $60 million. And then there's, on the far right-hand side, we have the program reserve funds. As I've mentioned in years past, what the reserve fund is allocations of sales tax revenue that is received in years prior. And as we accumulate revenues and these projects are delivered, we dip into those prior reserves to pay off the projects. A good example here is the Measure C projects budget. We're expected to use about $11 million, and part of that, the majority of that, is for the SR4 680 that was earmarked many, many years ago. And the second bullet point on the top up there, it talks about the Measure C reserve balance. We had, as we ended last fiscal year, we had about $16.8 million. Of that $16.8 million is $3.2 million that is reserved for additional projects and different things to be allocated and brought before the board in the future. So it looks like of the balance, we're going to use about $11 million in Measure C funds this fiscal year. This worksheet is a quick look at the changes of the major CIP projects from one year or for the beginning of the year to the mid-year budget changes. In the staff report, we kind of went through the major changes for each of these, so I'm just going to talk about some of the big numbers that are in there. We can see the SR4 bypass elements, CIP 5, that's the Balfour project. That's going to be reduced about $5 million due to some timing of the project. The I-680 corridor, the carpool lane, as we mentioned earlier, the construction is not going to start till about June, July. So that went down about $7 million. You can see some of the other projects that have increased. The Caldecott, we're doing some final closeout items, and that's increased about $1 million. The sub-regional Martinez Railroad improvements, that's a group category, which is going to be part of the, I believe it's the Ferry Street bridge improvements and different items out there. So you can see that as the CIP projects, there's about a $5.6 million change. And when we look at the other programs that fall underneath it, we have the administrative program. We have it costs us about $2.1 million a year. There's a minor adjustment in there for about $50,000. The salaries and benefits are about $676,000 budgeted. That's about 0.78% of the 1% limitation. So we typically run about that 80.8% of the 1%. And then overall, if we think about benefits and health care and different things like that, if you looked at the details of some of the reports I provided, the retirement expenses and some of the health insurance and insurance things went down. Based on the trend of when we budget, we try and project in sometimes a 6% increase in health care, but it's been staying pretty low for the authority here, so we saw some decreases in there as well. The program section shows an increase of $1.9 million. We had mentioned earlier the $1.4 million for the Gomentum station, and some of the the program section is an allocation of sales tax revenue. So as we catch up for what we actually received last year, there's an increase in there as well. The planning section stayed relatively the same, $3.5 million, as we have some revised contracts and some timing of these different things. The debt service has increased about $1 million. A lot of that is, or the biggest portion of that is due to when we issued the bonds in June of last year, we had some revised debt service schedules that we can now roll into this year's budget. And then we will be drawing down on the bond proceeds that we had mentioned earlier, about $43.9 million. With that, staff seeks approval of us moving this on to the authority board, and I'm willing to take questions.
Any questions? Yes, Newell?
Yeah, great. Thank you for a very concise report. Appreciate the way you present this in a very understandable way. I got a couple questions. Can you talk about debt service? What is it in how the 2017A and the 2012A were structured such that we have a tax change because of federal government? What was it in, do both bonds have that? And also, because there's $1 million it's costing us. You've asked for $1 million more for the next 6 months because of that adjustment, and you said it's because of interest, additional interest, and tax law changes.
I will hand this off to Randy to get into the FRNs, but when we had the proposed budget schedule on the 2017, which aren't variable, there's no, those are a fixed rate bond issuance. So there was an increase from what I had projected of $10,000 in additional principal balance, and then there was also a revised interest payments on that as well. But Randy will get into the change on the FRNs and how the tax rate changed at about 20 basis points, I believe.
So of this 950, only how much is it attributed for the interest you were saying? 10,000?
$10,000 on the principal side, and I believe it was about a $200,000 adjustment on the revised interest payment that's due.
So it's not that it went up, it's just that in how we were looking at it and just we're updating what it really is. There wasn't actually a change.
Yeah, when we do the budget, we start it in April, and then we bring it to the board in the beginning of June, and the bonds weren't completely finished when we brought it to the APC in June. So the final debt service payments and the day it goes to the market, it changes, and so this is just us catching up on
so maybe
June.
We could, that would be a good clarification, because the way it reads as though, something happened and now we owe more money, and I didn't think that's the way our bonds were put out. So it's just really an estimate. We have the knowledge now, and we're adjusting accordingly.
Yes, we will make that clarification, absolutely. There's a couple of things going on. One is that the budget was built based upon an estimated debt service schedule as that bond transaction had just closed as we're preparing the budget. And now the mid-year budget reflects the actual debt service schedule, which is slightly higher. About $300,000 of the number speaks to the Tax Reform Act that went into effect on January 1st. That did have an impact on our variable rate notes. That was a bit of a surprise to everyone in terms of the timing of the act going into effect on January 1, as well as the impact it would have on those public agencies that hold variable rate type debt. So with the marginal tax rate for corporations going from 35% to 21%, many of these bond documents with the variable rate type structure had built in these automatic triggers so that the banks can adjust the interest rate scale to bring their profitability back into equilibrium because of the tax rate change for them from a corporate perspective. So it does have an impact on the authority, and we're in the process of bringing back to the board a recommendation to restructure those floating rate notes into a transaction that gets us back to about the same cost effectiveness as we were experiencing before the Tax Reform Act went into effect.
And it doesn't apply to our fixed rate ones,
No,
because those
not at all.
didn't have that clawback. Thank you. And the other question I have, and this is
Can I interject a question
sorry,
on that
yeah.
point? And I apologize. I'm trying to understand how a 14% reduction in the corporate rate increases our debt service costs of a public agency.
Yeah.
I mean, explain to me the connection there, because you say it, and I'm struggling for the rationale.
All right. So the type of, if you were a bank, all right, and you wanted to make an investment decision, you're looking at your alternatives. Some of those alternatives are tax exempt, where as a corporation you don't pay any taxes on it, and some of them are taxable, where you do pay a tax rate. So when they look at those options and they look at something like what a public agency has to offer. We are offering tax-exempt bonds. They compare that to to their other investment alternatives.
Corporate bonds?
Corporate bonds, letter of credit products, and they price their instruments based upon whether they have to pay taxes on something or if they don't have to pay taxes on something. All right, so that they're about the same return, bottom line for the bank.
But it's a
All right, so-
devaluation of the effectiveness. The greater the tax implication, the better the rate on your bill, because you're buying a tax-free bond. So when that tax rate changed, they put a clawback in there. Effectively, it's the inverse of each other. The bigger the tax bite, the better the rate.
Reducing the corporate tax rate allows
Raised the rate.
allows folks to basically have to spend more money to borrow money.
Right, they
in
can't
the
shield
corporate
as much
finance
income.
market.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one of the unintended consequences of this wonderful tax bill.
There are, multiple consequences. This one impacted us, negatively.
Yeah, okay.
And so we want to restructure that particular obligation. It has about
Makes
a
sense to me. I think I get it now. Okay, sorry, Noel.
No. That was great. Randy, thank you for that. The other question, this might be other staff, is Caldecott Tunnel, we're saying $1,065,000. What's it for? I
Yes.
know you're budgeting, but what's going on? Because we haven't had this conversation in a while.
I can help answer that. There are a couple settlement projects that are being done in Berkeley and Oakland, and basically this just reflects that they plan to spend this money sooner than they told us earlier.
Okay.
So they're accelerating those schedules.
And when are we finally going to be out of the business of settling the fourth bore?
It'll be probably 2020.
Still coming? So,
Yeah.
Okay.
Year and a half. Okay. And then the other one is I-680, $2.263 million. This is the I-80 Central Avenue. Is this more than what we've been told? This $2.263 million here?
So there are two projects in this category, the I-80 Central Phase 1, as well as Phase 2, which the City of Richmond taking the lead on, as well and the other project is San Pablo Dam Road, Phase 1. And, we have cost increases on San Pablo Dam Road, and the schedule for I-80 Central is moving faster than we projected earlier, so that's where the difference
But
is.
this one says it's for cost increases. That means that's not planned. So my question is this 2.263 above and beyond what we as the board have talked about and authorized in additional changes, or is this in addition? Or is this not written?
So I can speak from the construction side. So from the construction side, Central Avenue is doing well. We don't have an issue. With San Pablo, and I don't know if Brian is taking this into account in the budget, there will be an increase in the allotment that we're going to be coming to the board for, and we're preparing to come to you in next month. And the reason is that the contractor had additional overhead because the project has taken longer to complete, and we ended up with a settlement with them. And right now, basically, they want me to release those funds as quickly as possible. So that's the increase in that we're going to be coming to you next month, and that's for San Pablo.
And we're also at the same time working on a settlement with the AE team. And
Right.
I assume that there's progress on that of some sort.
It sounds like, from what Newell's saying, that when you bring this to the full board for approval, you should be maybe laying out exactly what's driving that increase on the San Pablo interchange improvements.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, Bob.
This is Brian. I guess I'm just, this morning, I'm trying to tea leaf stuff. Do we have a projection of kind of what the new gas tax and DMV, et cetera? What was that? The new taxes for those?
SB1.
Is it SB1? Of what that's going to generate? Do we have an idea of what that could be?
I haven't seen anything. Some of the self-help county correlations and different, I forget the name of the one that's based out of Sacramento, that they come out with these little white papers that kind of give us some idea. That's kind of one that's hard to, I think, put on the city. I'm sure there'd be a certain percentage, but any tax increases is going to be, it's a tax which goes directly back to, you know, the certain, whatever the tax increase is for and what they've allocated that for, those taxes go there. It's the tax increases, or it's the cost of gas that increases, which increases the sales tax for the authority here. So I know I didn't answer your question. It's kind of hard to correlate that back to what the authority will receive as the price of gas on the tax that we receive on that. So,
Follow-up?
Thank you. So, better explain. Julie,
I
help me out.
I think maybe what you're wondering, most of the gas tax increase actually comes back to the local jurisdictions
For the locals.
for the local streets and roads. There are other things in SB1 that we can benefit from on the project side, but those are mostly competitive things, and we are in the process of applying for some of those right now. And maybe Tim can give you a more complete list of what we're going after.
Yeah, there's actually 4 competitive programs. There's trade corridors, congestion corridors, LPP, and an inner-city agency rail. So those 4 competitive programs, of those 4, the project list of those 4 were compiled locally through MTC and the CMAs. And so for CCTA, the only project we applied for out of those competitive programs was $33.1 million for 684 interchange. And and that's the only competitive program that we've applied for in those other programs. And then we're anticipating that for future cycles that we would apply for solutions for congested corridors and trade for projects like Innovate 680, the I-80 San Pablo Dam Road Phase 2. Those are some of the projects that we're anticipating applying for future cycles.
Got it. And on to close, Brian, thank you. You always present. You can tell you're a Brentwood Knight because you make it very understandable for us on this board, and you're very clear and concise. Thank you.
Other questions? I guess I have one. Brian, if you could go back to the first slide that you used to introduce this. Is that the first one? Yeah, the sources and uses. I was struck by, I mean, is this typical or not? I mean, we're showing various changes in revenue coming in, and yet somehow you're managing to make the expense side exactly correlate to it. You know, that's unusual in a budget revised process. So is this just a coincidence, or is this just, you know, really, really good money management? Can you answer that question?
I would love to take credit for it, but no, what's in there that makes it balance is the other sources, the last line in the sources of the revenue line, the $32.515 million. So we have our normal revenues, which is sales tax revenues, and then we have our contributions, which is federal, state, and local revenues, and then we have some investment money, and then we have the bond proceeds that tie up the CIP projects, and that fixes the shortfall there. So there's no cost to the authority, so you have a matching revenue and expenditure in that case. And then you have the programs, planning, administration, and debt service, which is all, as the money's collected in prior years, it's earmarked. So when that expenditure happened, those funds that we already have are used at that particular point in time. So you have a match. You have an exact match of using dollar for dollar. You know, for every expenditure you have a dollar matching of revenue that's from prior years. From a city perspective, that would be talking about reserves, using reserves to fund a shortfall, but there's no shortfall here. There's actual funds that have been earmarked and collected for these specific purposes. So I hope that answers your question.
It sounds like you have a reduction in revenue and you're just sort of allocating it in various categories to get it to balance. It's kind of arbitrary. Maybe, am I missing that?
The catch-all was other sources. If he didn't do that, it would have been off. And the fact is because of the way our money is, yeah, he made it balance.
There you go. Brilliant money.
It's okay.
All right.
You did.
I'll leave it at that. I mean, that's not a typical slide we see in municipal government on budget mid-year revise. So
It's never that precise.
it's never that precise. It's never to the dollar. So I was wondering why CCTA is different as an agency than the rest of us. And I think you just explained it to me.
Yep.
All right. Do we have any other questions or comments or directions we want to give on this item?
I would move the item with the direction that we do the clarification on the bonds, and also that what the anticipation is that you are going to go back and refinance those.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion carries 4-0. For the record, Commissioner Tom Butt came and went, and I didn't even see him leave. Does anybody?
He left at 8:10 or 9:10.
It was.
He turned that way, all of us.
He exit stage left. All right. So next we have item 10, which is the State Route 4 Balfour Road Interchange Widening Project 5005. Request to suspend withholding future retention to construction contract 427 with Brosmer and Wall, Inc. and Bay Cities Paving and Grading, a joint venture. Staff report.
Good morning, Chair, and congratulations again on your appointment and board members. This is actually an action item where we're going to ask you to recommend to the board that we start collecting retention on the State Route 4 Balfour project. And I have a brief presentation to update you on the progress of that project, but our construction contracts are aligned with the Public Contract Code, and that's Public Contract Code Section 9303A, where we withhold 5% out of every progress payment. And that 5%, it's theoretically works as leverage in case the contractor in some way or fashion is not performing and they get to the end of the project. We know we have that money to use against them at the end of the project. This Public Contract Code also allows the board, upon finding, and that's what the resolution was part of this packet, to stop withholding retention after 50% of the work has been completed. And if you approve this resolution, then we will issue a change order to the contractor, so we stop withholding money. The reason why we bring this to you, and Mayor Taylor asked this question earlier in the break room, is have you ever brought this to us before? And the answer is no, we have not. But one reason is because other contractors really weren't up to speed that they could do this, so they never asked us, so we never had the opportunity to come to you. But there's been a couple of instances where towards the end of the project, the work gets extended through no fault of the contractor. Hillcrest being a perfect example, where there were some issues with some ADA ramps. That was basically, the work was worth about $200,000, but the project was extended about 8-9 months because there was a lot of back and forth between us and Caltrans getting the fix. And then we ended up withholding $2.5 million for that period of time. So it ended up being a little unfair to the contractor because they was basically done. So with that, I'm going to give you a brief update based on the slides here, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions. So bid opened on September 26th. The low bidder was Rosemary Wall and Bay Cities joint venture, both local firms. Right off the bat, the project started on good footing because they were 9.6% under the engineer's estimate, and they were about half of that underneath the second lowest bidder. We proceeded with the work on February 2017, and we expect to be completed late this year or very early next year. So as far as the contract items, we have paid out about $19.5 million. That's roughly for 52% of the work, and that's why we're able to come to you and ask for this action, because the public contract code allows us to stop withholding retention. Work is going extremely well. We really haven't had a lot of changes, and that's, of course, a testament to the good work that staff did during construction. Susan Miller. And so far, we have retention of $1 million. So the way this would work is this retention stays with the authority all the way through the end of the project. Theoretically, we will collect an additional $1 million towards the end of the project, and that will be 5% of the value of the work. And so that's the leverage that we will still retain. And we are about 53.4% schedule-wise, how many days have transpired. This is some of the major activities that have been accomplished. We had a very sensitive operation with Los Vaqueros pipeline. We had to turn it off for 72 hours, provide a bypass, and the people from that own the facility, I can't remember which water authority it is, came and inspected to make sure everything was fine, because as part of our work, we had to actually put the slab on top of it as protection, because the road is going to be right on top of it. The new on-ramp and off-ramp onto westbound 4 will go right over this pipe. So that was very sensitive, and it was very concerning to them, and they were very happy with the work we accomplished. We will widen westbound 4 so that we could make room for that big dirt pile of dirt on the left. And after that, we proceeded to do the work over Deer Creek Bridge. That bridge is different than the other two that you see on the slide because it has to be cast in place. The reason it was cast in place is because it has a very interesting and unique geometry where the precast girders wouldn't have been able to work. So we actually had to put false rock and pour it and put footings and bypass the water. But eventually we got the work done before October 15th, which was the critical date, because after October 15th, then we have to be out of there. The board wouldn't allow us, the water board wouldn't allow us to continue with the work. So that was also great progress by the team. And of course, the most recent activity is raising of those very heavy and tall girders. They're about 7 feet tall. And the one here on the lower right, that activity is the work over Balfour Road that was completed at night. And happy to say that there was really no major problems with it, and everything worked out well.
Excuse me, I want to make a comment with that. You really shook our residents up. They weren't there, and they got up the next morning, and they were there. People went, what happened? So, I mean, they were already fabricated. Now, am I correct? Because that was...
Oh, yeah.
They trucked them in because that was crazy. Anyway, very complimentary because it probably saved a lot of grief.
Yeah, so we actually like precast girders because they allow the work to happen quicker, like you stated, as opposed to putting false work, which and also requires more closures when you do it the other way. So yeah, thank you for that, Mayor Taylor. So and also keep in mind that prior to even getting to this stage, underneath all that dirt, there are piles. We had to drive those piles, very noisy. You probably heard them.
About that.
So the point I'm trying to make here is the progress is going extremely well, and that's the reason why we're bringing this forward to you. Mayor Taylor also asked the question, does that mean you're going to come to us all the time with these type of questions? And the answer is, it really depends on the progress that the contractor's making. If we feel the contractor's not making progress, then we're not going to bring these activities to you because we won't be able to show the nice slides that we have shown here where progress is moving at a good rate. A couple of other things about this item is that, on top of the retention, our contracts also stipulate that the contractor has to buy payment and performance bonds that are equivalent to 100% of the value of the contract. So if something were to go bad with the contractor, something that we cannot even imagine right now, the authority will go to the bonding company, and they are obligated to complete the work. So that's number one. Again, what the issues of maybe sometimes it's unfair, how much this money is being withheld from the contractors. We're still going to maintain the $1 million, as I stated earlier. And we also think that we're going to be more competitive with the other people that do the type of work that we do. Caltrans, we don't want to be like Caltrans. I understand a lot of things that they do. They don't withhold any retention. So and we compete against those same contractors. Baltimore and Wall and Bay Cities do all kinds of work with Caltrans. So this will allow us to have be in a more competitive position against the other owners for which these contractors might bid work on. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ivan. I think Newell had something.
Yeah, just that very good presentation as well, Ivan. Just to be clear on the math, so you're suggesting as this action is to release the $1 million that we've retained based on that they've billed approximately $20 million. We kept 5%. But going forward, you're going to still do the 5%, but you want to release that. So go back to a zero balance on retention and then build back up, and then are you going to release at the end?
So sorry I wasn't able to explain that better, but it's actually the opposite. We have withheld $1 million, and we're going to hold to that $1 million.
Okay.
What's going to happen is we're not going to collect any more going forward.
Okay. That makes sense. I didn't quite catch that. And because there's a payments and performance bond, do we have to have that cleared by the bonding company? Because they base their bonds based on risk. If they know that there's 5% cash held and they have a contractor that fails.
We don't have to go through their bonding company.
All right. Very good. Thanks.
Yes, Bob.
Yeah, I guess, would I be right to assume, which is a tough word, that once we do this for this first contractor, I can't imagine the word won't get out, and why are you smiling? Am I on the right track?
So the contractors have come to us in the past, again, because the contract somehow gets extended, and they don't think it's their responsibility as to why it's getting extended. So we have experience already with people coming to us. So the answer to your question is that, yes, most likely we're going to be asked in the future to release or stop withholding more retention. But again, there's going to be some tests that has to be met between staff, right? Executive director, deputy, myself, and only when we feel confident enough will be bringing it forward to you. So we're not going to be shy of saying no. We don't think we demonstrated the progress that is required.
Yeah. So another question?
Well, just clarification. So I guess what you're saying, it will be judged on each individual basis, but each time we do make this adjustment, it has to appear before the board for approval?
That's correct. It's completely at your discretion. Staff has no discretion on this issue.
Okay. So this sounds to me, Ivan, like a case where this particular, we like the way this contractor's performing, and we're basically have the discretion to reward him for good performance, good behavior, and to hope to get that same kind of treatment on other projects in the future.
That is perfect way to say it.
That's right.
And it took a lawyer.
Yeah. And with that perfect wording, I would move the item.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll call it back for calling for the question. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Ivan. Very nice presentation.
And my last comment is, folks, it's going to be a long year.
But a uniquely geometric year, given the staff report we just heard about the bridges that they have to build in your neck of the woods. Okay. Next, moving on, we are up to commissioner and staff reports. First is chair's comments and reports. I have no report. Commissioners. I have nothing. And executive staff.
None to report?
Next up is item 12, other business. There's none. Next up is adjournment. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Been moved and seconded by Pierce and Taylor. All those in favor? Aye. I didn't hear everybody vote on that.
Yes,
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Good meeting, guys. We adjourn at 9:39 a.m.